The story of D.B. Cooper remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in commercial aviation history, a mystery that has baffled FBI and amateur sleuths for over half a century. It began on the rainy afternoon of November 24, 1971, at Portland International Airport. A man carrying a black attached case approached the Northwest Orient Airlines counter and purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle. He used the alias Dan Cooper, a name that would later be immortalized as D.B. Cooper due to a journalistic error. He was described as a man in his mid-40s, wearing a dark suit, a white-collared shirt, a narrow black tie with a mother-of-pearl clip, and a lightweight raincoat. After boarding Flight 305, a Boeing 727, Cooper took seat 18C. Shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Thinking it was just a phone number from a lonely passenger, she dropped it into her purse. Cooper leaned toward her and whispered that she should look at the note, informing her that he had a bomb. When she sat beside him, he opened his case just enough for her to see 8 red cylinders attached to wires, and a large battery. His demands were precise: $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills for parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane upon arrival. During the flight to Seattle, Cooper was remarkably calm and polite. He ordered a bourbon and water, paid his drink tab, and even tried to give the flight attendants the change. This composure suggested he was not a desperate criminal, but rather someone with a calculated plan, possibly with a military or intelligence background. Upon landing in Seattle, the passengers and 2 flight attendants were released in exchange for the money and the parachutes. Cooper then ordered the remaining crew to fly toward Mexico City. He gave the pilots very specific technical instructions: fly at an altitude of no more than 10,000 feet, maintain a minimum airspeed of approximately 170 knots, and keep the landing gear down with the flaps set at 15 degrees. This configuration was intended to keep the plane slow and stable at a low altitude, where the air pressure would allow the rear stairs to be opened, without causing a fatal decompression. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, amid a freezing rainstorm, Cooper lowered the aft air stair and jumped into the pitch-black night. The FBI launched Operation Noriak, one of the most extensive searches in U.S. history. Despite searching thousands of acres of rugged forest and mountainous terrain, no trace of the man, his parachute, or the money was found. The only physical evidence left behind was Cooper's black clip-on tie. Decades later, advanced forensic analysis of the tie revealed over 100,000 microscopic particles, including pure titanium, bismuth, and antimony. In 1971, these rare metals were used almost exclusively in high-tech aerospace facilities or chemical plants, leading researchers to believe Cooper might have been an engineer or a lab technician for a company like Boeing. A major break in the case occurred in 1980 when an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram found 3 bundles of rotting cash while vacationing on the banks of the Columbia River at a spot called Tina Bar. The serial numbers matched the ransom money perfectly. However, the discovery raised more questions than it answered. Geological analysis of the river silt suggested the money arrived at the riverbank several years after the hijacking, not in 1971. This led to theories that the money had been buried elsewhere and later washed downstream, or that Cooper had survived and lost the cash years later. The FBI investigated over 800 suspects, ranging from veteran paratroopers like Richard McCoy to former soldiers like Robert Rackstraw. Despite numerous deathbed confessions and promising leads, no DNA evidence or fingerprints ever provided a definitive match. Many experts believe Cooper perished in the jump, likely succumbing to the freezing temperatures and the treacherous terrain of the Pacific Northwest. Others argue that his meticulous planning suggests he was capable of surviving and disappearing into a new life. In 2016, the FBI officially suspended the active investigation, leaving the true identity of D.B. Cooper as one of the greatest vanishing acts in history. On the evening of October 21, 1978, a 20-year-old pilot named Frederick Valentich set out on what was intended to be a routine training flight. He was flying a light Cessna 182 aircraft from Moorabbin Airport in Melbourne to King Island, a journey across the Bass Strait. The weather was nearly perfect. The sky was clear, the winds were calm, and visibility was excellent. Valentich, who had about 150 hours of flight time, was an enthusiastic young pilot aiming to build his experience. At 7:06 p.m., Valentich contacted Melbourne Air Traffic Control. For the first half hour, everything seemed normal. However, at 7:06 p.m., his voice became noticeably tense. He radioed controller Steve Roby to ask if there was any other aircraft known to be in his sector, below 5,000 feet. The controller's response was a definitive no. What followed over the next 6 minutes is etched into aviation lore. Valentich reported seeing a large object with four bright landing lights. According to his report, the object flew over him at high speed, narrowly missing his aircraft. When the controller reconfirmed that there was no known traffic in the area, Valentich began describing the craft in more detail. He stated it was a long, metallic object that was all shiny on the outside. He attempted to orbit the object, but it seemed to be playing a game with him, performing high-speed maneuvers and circling his small Cessna. By 7:11 p.m., the situation turned from strange to dire. Valentich reported that his engine was beginning to malfunction, idling roughly and coughing. His final words in the transmission have become the stuff of nightmares. He told the controller, "That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering and it's not an aircraft." Following this statement, the radio stayed open for 17 seconds. Instead of a human voice, the controllers heard a series of strange, metallic scraping sounds. Some experts later described it as the sound of metal being rubbed against metal. Then, the signal went dead. An immediate search and rescue operation was launched. For several days, military Orion aircraft, ships, and private vessels scoured the Bass Strait. They covered over 1,000 square miles of water. Investigators looked for any sign of a crash, fuel slicks, floating debris, or life jackets. Despite the calm sea and clear conditions, absolutely nothing was found. A plane weighing nearly a ton had vanished without leaving a single trace. On the surface of the water, investigators explored several terrestrial theories. One was spatial disorientation. Skeptics suggested that Valentich might have become disoriented and was flying upside down, seeing the reflection of his own lights in the water. This could explain the engine trouble, as the Cessna's gravity-fed fuel system would fail if inverted. However, this theory does not account for the metallic sounds or the total lack of wreckage. Another theory suggested a staged disappearance. Valentich was known to be fascinated by UFOs, and some believed he might have orchestrated the event to start a new life. However, police found no evidence of planning. He had no debts, no criminal record, and his family insisted he would never abandon them. The Valentich case remains officially unsolved. Despite numerous claims of UFO sightings from the ground that same night, no physical evidence has ever surfaced. Frederick Valentich and his Cessna 182 remained lost to the Bass Strait, leaving behind only a haunting radio transcript and a mystery that shows no signs of being solved.